Yo creo que si conozco a alguien que está próxima a ser mamá, lo primero que haría sería recomendarle el programa porque te entrega mucho apoyo, mucha información y más que nada como apoyo emocional, una guía, te da una visión diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Y así pues es un bonito programa, porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad y en nuestro caso que estamos solos en este país ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás, entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber cómo qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, como hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro. Vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia,
sí.
para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
El objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien y que las familias estén bien significan niños felices, niños sanos y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
There we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency's Technical Advisory Committee. We're gonna go through a couple business items, and then our main focus of our meeting this morning will be to discuss among the TAC members, asking questions of consultants and staff, and hearing any public comment on the GSP improvements and corrective actions. That's going to be our main focus for the first half of this rather long meeting. If we get through it, we'll get out early. So I'm Beth Salamone, your chair, and we are going to have a formal roll call, but I just want to make some introductions. We've got our vice chair, Sean White. Javier Silva, representing a tribal community, is online. Good morning. We've got Ken Todd here from the Upper Russian River Water Agency, our retail water suppliers in the Ukiah Valley. We've got Adam Gaska here for the agricultural community, and Joe Scriven here from the Resource Conservation District. I see Amber is online. Amber, are you representing the county this morning?
Yes, I am.
Good to see you back. And from Sonoma Water, doesn't look like Dawn is on yet. Stephen Maples did say he would be attending in a few minutes late. I did not get a confirmation from Dawn, so maybe they'll be joining in. And last but definitely not least, we have Laurel Marcus from the California Land Stewardship Institute. Good morning. I see we have we have Dominic here from DWR. Good morning, Dominic. Also online, we've got Jamie Neary and a few others. So welcome, everyone. And with that, I will hand it over for a formal roll call.
Member Marcus?
Here.
Member Linderman?
He's not present. Amber Fassett is here representing the county.
Member Scriven?
Here.
Member Silva?
Good morning. Yeah.
Member Todd? Member Gaska? Member White? Chair Solomon?
And I'm here as well. Thank you very much. All right. Approval of agenda. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda for March 14th, 2024 TAC meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
That's Gaska. That's White. Anyone opposed? We'll consider that passed. Thank you. Now, public comment on items not on the agenda. This time is reserved for the public to address the TAC about matters not on the agenda but within our jurisdiction. Anyone that would like to speak, if you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in the room, just please walk on up to the podium. Not seeing anyone. I want to assure everyone that public comment will be taken during each item as well, though I will prioritize TAC members. Okay, moving right along. Item 4, overview of the DWR and Department of Water Resources, sorry about that, anticipated improvements and corrective actions for groundwater sustainability plan and potential projects and management actions, or PMAs as we call them. We're going to receive an overview, a slideshow by Larry Walker and Associates, and there is a staff report prepared by Eric in the packet. I hope you all read that. And then the TAC will discuss the technical merits of the various actions to address these deficiencies and improvements and corrective actions. The outcome of this is that we want to have a clear recommendation. It might not be consensus, but we want to have a clear path of recommending what we talked about to the board. And I just want to say right off the bat, I think I would like to suggest that the format of that would be that Sean and I, as chair and vice chair, or whatever, attend the GSA board meeting and present that together. I think that would be a really good show of force there. Okay? All right, Eric and Audra, take it away. Thank you.
Audra, please proceed with the presentation when you're ready.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Chair Solomon. We are, just like Beth said, going to provide hopefully a succinct overview of some of the feedback that we received, rather the GSA received from DWR. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we will get started. And Laura from Larry Walker Associates, who was very much involved with the GSP development process and model development, is here as well and will be able to chime in and provide any other contextual information that might be helpful for the TAC. All right, so we were very pleased, the GSA was very pleased that the GSP was recommended for approval by Department of Water Resources last summer in July. Along with their determination letter, DWR provided a staff report that contained a series of suggestions, recommended actions they would like the GSA to take by the time the periodic update is completed in January 2027. And so that's a few years away. And there were sort of two major aspects of the sort of suggested actions that DWR made. The first of those was that DWR supported and encouraged the GSA to complete the anticipated improvements that were identified as part of the groundwater sustainability plan. And so we'll walk through some of those kind of major goals that were identified in the data gaps analysis. The second component was that there were 5 additional recommended corrective actions. So 5 specific things that DWR pointed out that they would like the GSA to address, again, as the GSA is going through this update process by January 2027. Now, there is some overlap between these two major categories, as we'll see. We're going to go through them, and then we're going to sort of pull out what are the major things that need to hopefully be completed by the GSA in order to satisfy these directives by that 2027 deadline. And again, this information is going to be coming from the staff report that accompanied the determination letter back in July. And then we're also going to be pulling out some information from the GSP itself in one of the appendices. And both of those should have been provided in the agenda package. Okay, this is a little bit, but the major thing we're going to be hitting here are what were the high priority data gap items that were identified in the GSP. So things that were identified as being majorly restrictive to understanding of the basin, its water budget, and whether or not sustainability is being attained. So the first of those that was identified again in this data gap analysis that is part of the GSP appendix is well construction information and well inventory. This is very much focused, as we'll talk about, on how can we improve the model and representation of basin conditions in the model in order to do things like run simulations in the future. So this would be anonymous. We'll talk about this more, but really we're thinking about things like what depth are various wells screened to? What's the geology like in these different wells, and where are the wells located? So kind of that contextual information. The next is going to be better evaluation of groundwater elevations. There were very few wells in the basin with long-term records during GSP development. I think there were only around 4. One of those has since been destroyed. And so there was this directive, a hope to really better characterize what water level looks like and how it changes seasonally, annually, interannually within the basin. The GSA has been making progress towards this goal already, as we'll talk about later today when we look at the update, the annual report update. We have DWR TSS funded continuous sensors in 5 different wells. We're starting to incorporate some of that data. So again, we're making progress in some of these high priority data gap areas already. So again, there's a hope though that the monitor network will be expanded and that higher frequency data can be collected. The next item is the water budget. So trying to get a better handle on some of the sort of municipal and non-municipal domestic use. So sort of that Willow County Water District, City of Ukiah, those types of water uses, extending and updating some of that information for how water is going to use in the basin. And then next on the list here is depletion of those interconnected surface water. So the interplay between surface water and groundwater throughout the basin is very much linked. They're very connected. And there was a a recognition in the GSP that that monitoring network needed to be expanded and enhanced. And then finally, looking at better characterizing the stream networks and the hydrologic data. So we're talking about things like stream gauges to get a better sense of main stem Russian River and tributary flow, what that looks like, and also better physical characterization of the stream beds themselves. What are cross sections looking like? What's the minimum depth in the stream beds looking like? What are some maybe more specific course location for some of those tributaries that were harder to characterize during the GSP? So again, this is a bit, but it highlights the major areas that were identified during GSP development where the GSA needs to get more detailed and sometimes just more information in general. Okay, so that's what was in the GSP. Next, we're going to talk about what was in the DWR staff report in terms of corrective actions. And again, you're going to see there's some overlap between these two major categories. Okay, so this is a very high level summary of what those different corrective actions were requesting. The two that you see bolded, numbers 1 and 4, are the ones that are going to take more considerable effort. 2, 3, and 5 are really just clarification points, redefining something in terms of different units. And so those were really going to be part of our periodic updates that occur as part of the annual report, some of the more routine technical work that we do for the GSA. We're not too worried about those. So let's look more closely at numbers 1 and 4. Okay, so what's going to be entailed in these two corrective actions that DWR has identified? The first here, update the water budget. So this is something that we anticipate will be part of that 2027 periodic evaluation of the GSP. Again, this is sort of that looking back, seeing what we want to improve, what we can enhance, what we can update in the GSP in January 2027. And this is going to be focused on sort of evaluating and qualifying some of the historic surface water data that was used during GSP development. And there are definitely opportunities to collaborate with other agencies and have some information sharing here that should help support that process. The other is to include sort of a better explanation of how the model for the basin incorporates Lake Mendocino. So the storage, maybe any underflow coming from Lake Mendocino interacting with the aquifer, and how that's characterized and maybe how that can be improved. Again, those are things that we think will be sort of covered and incorporated as part of the 2027 periodic evaluation. Okay, so the next here we see is related to something that was identified in the high priority data gaps in the GSP. And this is related to the interconnected surface waters. So DWR staff report identified, they include a few different paragraphs on this part, but the major things they're hoping to see are better establishment of the sustainable management criteria. So again, those are the metrics against which GSAs, are supposed to compare performance of their monitoring network, whether it's water elevation, water quality, in this case, depletion of interconnected surface waters. And so for GSP development, because there were so many data gaps, the GSA elected to define these sustainable management criteria in a particular way, and DWR wants that to be improved and enhanced and basically redone. There's also a call to fill in data gaps, which we already knew about, looking at the GSP and the high priority data gap report, also conducting more monitoring, and then getting a handle on what segments are really influenced by interconnection with the groundwater system, with the aquifer, and the timing. So kind of that spatial component and the timing component that plays into this interconnectivity between the stream segments and the groundwater basin. And then also getting a better handle on all of those beneficial uses and impacts of, or potential impacts of, depletion of these interconnected surface waters. So again, getting maybe a better handle on all the interested parties, hearing what the concerns are there. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. I know this is quite a bit of detail to cover, but if we distill down sort of the things that we think will require some sort of concerted effort and time to prepare for the 2027 periodic evaluation, that are not going to sort of be built in or baked in already, like some of those model updates I described in the last slide. What we're thinking about are ensuring that we have an expanded, the GSA, I should say, has an expanded and enhanced monitoring network, that there is some kind of improved characterization that addresses all those different issues that DWR brought up related to interconnected surface waters. And ideally that there's some kind of well inventory in order to better characterize locations where pumping occurs, and also, for example, what aquifers are being accessed. So let's go into these in a little bit more detail. And then after this, and I'm happy to pause at any point, I only have 3 more slides left, and then I'm going to hand it over to the chair and open up discussion. All right, so again, this idea of expanding, so the number of locations that are involved, and then enhancing, how can we get maybe higher frequency data for the monitoring network? And so we're going to talk for each of these 3 major topics about kind of the basic purpose, what kinds of tasks might be involved very broadly, and the general timeline. Okay, so here, one of the major purposes of having an expanded and improved monitoring network is to have information that we can feed into the model to better represent what's happening in the basin, and then look forward and understand what future scenarios might look like under, say, different water management conditions, maybe under different climatic conditions and the like, so that we can see, you know, how we are doing in terms of being on track for sustainability. And so, again, one of the major things that needs to probably happen as part of this is increasing the number of what are called representative monitoring points, sort of like official monitoring points within the network that are going to be compared against the sustainability management criteria. Okay, so right now we have 7 in the GSP. One of these was destroyed. We're working with the DWR to provide a replacement for that, but that's very, very few points relative to other GSAs and kind of what's more typical. So we want to increase that. And the way we do that is by having more wells that are being monitored frequently, which is something we've been actively working towards. All right, so again, we're thinking about expanding the number of wells, increasing the number of wells that have these continuous sensors, and so that we have a good idea of how water levels are dynamically changing through time. And later today, when we talk about the annual report data results, we'll get to see what some of the continuous sensor data looks like and how we can really see fluctuation through time and in response and precipitation, how useful that is. Okay, and again, there are certain areas that have been identified in the GSP as priority data gap areas. So we want to really target those as much as possible. And so this is something that would probably be ongoing for the next several years as funding becomes available and the like. And we'll go through some of these logistics. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to this idea of the interconnected surface water study. So the great news here is that CLSI and Laura Marcus, they're already making progress on improving data gap coverage. And we can talk about that a little more for interconnected surface, surface water characterization within the basin. In addition, there are grant funding opportunities that are really well suited to even further characterizing and expanding our understanding of interconnected surface waters within the basin. We have an active grant application out with CDFW. It is still under consideration, but we hope to hear about that soon. And there are other opportunities as well that we think we could leverage if we do not get a favorable outcome. So again, when we're thinking about the purpose behind the work that CLSI is doing and what additional investigations might try to do, we're trying to fill in some of these major data gaps. Again, thinking about physically characterizing some of the stream networks, river networks within the basin. CLSI, for example, is going to be, I believe, characterizing around 17 miles of the thalweg, so the lowest point in the Russian River. We also want to try to understand better what's happening with some of the major tributaries within the basin. Get a better sense of, again, groundwater elevation for more parts of the basin, because that will be so important for understanding the timing and potential depletion of interconnected surface water. And again, this idea of where is interconnection happening in the basin? When is it happening? And how does that maybe change seasonally and year to year? And then again, trying to better capture some of these dynamics in the model so that we can look forward to other types of scenarios and understand some of those interconnection dynamics. Again, something that will be done as part of the CLSI study, and something that we could build upon also with other investigations. And again, establishing those sustainable management criteria, just as DWR identified in their corrective action. And then again, trying to really understand the broad suite of these different beneficial users within the basin that are impacted by interconnected surface waters. And one thing that was called out in some of the comment letters that were received on the GSP are really these groundwater dependent ecosystems. And so that's going to be one aspect of the environmental beneficial users within the basin. That was also some area of data gap that was identified, although it was not the highest priority. So what are some of the things that might happen related to this? So, of course, increased monitoring, both geochemical. We have some tools, there exist tools that, that can be used in order to aid understanding of surface water groundwater connection, the timing that can complement physical monitoring as well. So that would happen, likely for the Russian River and its tributaries. Again, expanding the sensors and monitoring network for different aspects, whether it's water level, again, stream gauges, maybe some shallow wells. And you can see too that when we're talking expanding the monitoring network, that kind of connects back, and there's some overlap with the previous topic we just discussed. And then again, completing some other outreach and engagement with the community and different agencies to get a better understanding of the users and how we can protect the beneficial uses. And then of course, incorporating more understanding of characterizing those groundwater dependent ecosystems. So this is something that would likely be happening over again the next several years and a little bit beyond the 2027 update. Okay, this is our last slide. Thank you again, everybody, for your patience. I hope this is giving you a slightly better sense of some of the key areas that the GSA needs to address in terms of data gaps and our improved understanding. So the well inventory, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, this is very much focused on getting a better understanding of what the subsurface is like in the basin and how we can better improve model representation. For example, so that we can do things like understand whether pumping is or is not impacting surface waters. So we have another tie-in sort of back with the interconnected surface water study, a little bit of tie-in with the monitoring. But we want to be able to answer some of these management questions and having a better understanding of where pumping is happening, from what depth in the aquifer it's happening, and again, some of that geology that impacts how water moves through the subsurface. All of that is going to be extremely helpful. And so the other aspect of this is that having well construction data, so again, where a well is screened, how deep it's been drilled, some of this key information related to the structure of the well is actually required for the existing and future monitoring network. It's actually a Sigma requirement. And in the GSP, it is described that some of that information is lacking. So what are some steps that could be taken in order to fill in some of these data gaps and improve model characterization of basin conditions? So one thing would be collecting anonymized well location information. So again, the pumping rates don't really matter. It's really for this purpose, really it's the interest in where pumping happens in the basin. And this could be even a generalized location. It doesn't have to be an exact point. Okay, there's also going to be interest in, again, like I talked about, things like well depth, the screening, and then the reference elevations that we use to compare against the water elevation when we report information and use it in the model. And then also going back to some wells that have already been constructed, especially those in our monitoring network, and using things like surveys or well logs to get a better understanding of what the physical characteristics of those wells are. And so this would not necessarily need to take a very long time. It would just depend upon some of the logistics of community engagement, access to the monitoring network wells in order to go back and collect some of this physical information that's so helpful. So that actually covers everything that I wanted to hit and that I hope will be useful to the TAC to engage in conversation about some of these key objectives that will be important for addressing the periodic evaluation for January 2027.
Thank you, Audra. I believe that you hit the intent, which was to give us an overview of all of the improvements needed, but to highlight on the ones that we really want to discuss today. So could you go back to slide 15? Well, actually 14, please. Okay, so there we go. These are the three that we are going to focus on with our discussion today. And we're going to start with the expanded and enhanced monitoring network. So in the past, our TAC meetings have been a lot of presentation for the consultants and a few questions. Today, I feel like we've got a good handle on this, and we really need to hear from TAC members and obviously the public as well. Again, with the intent that we're going to make recommendations to the board as they move forward with their rate and fee study. I want to be clear, we're not discussing the actual rate and fees today. We are discussing the technical merits of the projects to address these deficiencies. If you have questions about the rate and fee study, Catherine is here, and we'll hold those off until we get a good handle on the discussion. So with that, if you would go to the next slide, please, Audra. Expanded Enhanced Monitoring Network. I'm going to start the discussion and questions off with Adam Gaska, who's our ag representative, and I'm going to call on each of the TAC members. Each time I call on you, it'll be random. If you have something you want to say before I call on you, please raise your hand. We will prioritize TAC member comments over the public, but we will get to public comments. Adam, what do you think?
I mean, with all these items, cost is one of my largest concerns, what it's going to cost our community. Do we have an idea of how many more points, monitoring points we need that we're looking for and location of those? And what kind of, I guess, equipment are we going to be installing on wells to gather?
Laura, I'm going to defer to you on this one.
Yeah, so actually, this is a great question, and so some of the installation already happened. So some of these points, like the one that are that have been funded through the technical support services of Department of Water Resources, are already there. They are not yet official monitoring point because it takes time to just develop our understanding of the water levels. So we are not talking about more than another probably 3 or 4 points between different aquifers. And what we are trying to do is install instruments that are collecting data continuously as much as possible with telemetry. So these don't really require any significant maintenance. So far, the ones that we installed, they basically collected data for all the time. We installed some in 2020 and 2021, and we barely went out there. So we didn't have to invest much funding on just gathering the data. So it might be in terms of groundwater monitoring points, it might not be a huge lift actually, unless somebody comes in and say, no, we really want to have a way bigger. We are trying to be very conservative, so tell you what it's really needed. I mean, 7 points between the two aquifers, I have to say, it's really it's really limited. Laura?
Wait, I just want to make sure, Adam, did you have
Yeah.
any follow-up
Sorry.
with that?
Not right now.
Okay. So Laura, what I hear you saying is additional 3 to 4 points, but are those wells that
On
have
top
already
of,
that
no,
have already
on,
been drilled?
yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm not thinking of, we never thought about drilling new wells, honestly.
Okay.
The new wells that have been drilled were just funded through DWR. For our purpose, we would just use existing wells.
And would that also include, is it just groundwater wells that you're looking at, or would it also include stream flow gauges or anything else for the monitoring network, the RMPs?
For the monitoring network, we may, I didn't touch on stream gauges because those go a little bit more into the interconnected surface water.
Okay.
So we have 2 new stream gauges that we installed with Laurel during GSP development. And we may have to think about something else. I was just concentrating mostly on groundwater right now.
Okay, great. Laurel?
I've said this before, but we've been continuously monitoring 5 wells since 2015. We've done it privately without any government money, in collaboration with the owners. I think we could probably get some of those owners to allow us to give you all that data. Also, in the Bureau of Reclamation grant, there's 3 wells for continuous. We only do continuous. The instantaneous measurements just really don't give you enough. And then as part of the FROST program for stream flow, we have 8, I believe it's 8 stream flow gauges in the basin. So, I mean, I don't know if DWR has particular rules about any of these things. We're following, USGS protocols and doing these measurements, so they're up to grade. It's not like we're a bunch of amateurs. So maybe you don't need to spend a whole lot of money on this, particularly given the Bureau of Reclamation grant funding 3 of them with telemetry. Now, over time, obviously somebody besides us is going to have to do this. So the GSA will have to fund the long-term work on them. Stream flow is labor intensive, well monitoring is not. But I think that we have kind of more of a network than the GSP really describes. And I think that's because these are private and we were concerned about not, making all that information public. But I believe there's a way to still incorporate them. And Laura, I know you know all the details, but I think, maybe we have a lot of this done and we don't have to spend that much more.
I mean, Laura, that would be really great. And that's why I kept it really to maybe 3 or 4 more new instruments and really no drilling, nothing like that, which we know instrumenting 3 or 4 more wells is eventually 1 day of work and just a pretty limited budget. So we are not talking about rocket science in terms of funding. But if you can find, we just need an agreement from the private landowners, well owners, so that we can post the data on the Sigma website. And we don't need to post the continuous data, Laura. This is what made my life much easier in all the other basins. I collect the continuous, I may use the continuous for the model, but what gets published does not need to be continuous.
I think that would be great because really it's the model that we want this for, not to post a bunch of graphs online. And I'm willing to talk to all of the people involved and see, how they feel about it. But there's, these wells are scattered over a pretty big area. So it may address your, concern about where these are located and things like that.
So can we have that as an action item? That's great news, Laurel. Thank you. And as an action item for CLSI and LWA to work together on identifying and moving forward on that. And we could, hear back at the next TAC meeting about that, be great. If there's anything that you need from other TAC members or GSA staff to assist, please let us know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Sean?
maybe.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Laura, was your comment and question?
No,
complete?
I was just kind of finishing that up that if we really find wells already suitable and we get the permission to use, then as Laurel said, the GSA just needs to think about the long-term maintenance.
Right. Okay. Sean White, please.
Can you hear me? I believe it's on. A couple things. A quick step back, I think, is important. I was thankful, honestly, that you included the link to the approval letter because I hadn't really gone back and actually read that. And while we're not discussing the rate and fee study today, there was a lot of talk that we'd be giving guidance to the board on projects and management actions that do drive the rate and fee study. And I think it's really important to go back and actually read the letter, because the letter uses words like should and recommended and doesn't use required or must or shall in any of them. So I do get the feeling that many of these are being presented as they are, and if you read the letter and my interpretation of them, they aren't. All of these things will be great to know, so I'm not opposed to doing them, but to me, revisiting a lot of complex modeling without actually addressing this issue first, to me, is not efficient. Because a model is only as good as the data deriving it, and if we know we have a puny network of wells, many of which aren't even continuously read yet, and all of them have a relatively short history and data set that go with them, I don't really know what we're trying to do to improve modeling and criteria and all of the other things in this recommended list without actually knowing what the heck is going on in the first place. The data we do get from the few wells we have is interesting, but it again is such a short list. To me, if we were going to prioritize anything, it would simply be this task, because this is what drives everything as far as modeling whatever in the future. And this is also actually relatively inexpensive. Well monitoring equipment for static levels is simply not expensive. You put it in once and Joe doesn't have to go out there all of the time to harvest the data. It's much more informative than 2 points a year. And it will really make it so when we do get to reestablishing our criteria for compliance, it's actually based on a reasonable number of data points, and we can all feel good about the things we are setting as criteria that could or could not have significant effects on our community. And I just think right now, we established thresholds, not because we thought we had all of the information we needed to do them, but because we had to. There was a ticking time clock, and we did the best we could with what we had, and we're successful. But I really think of all of the things that are in this recommended list of things, filling it with information, this one and the well inventory are the two things that will actually inform what we're doing in the future. To me, all of the other things without just the baseline information that really should be driving them is not really great science-based decision making, which is kind of what this group anyway is supposed to be directing. So for me, of all of the things in the list, I would love to put most of the eggs in the actual data basket that will drive things in the future. And I would love to put the rest of those eggs in the well inventory basket, because to me, it's really those two giant uncertainties that will have the biggest impact on what really transpires in the future.
Thanks, Sean. So to summarize, again, the highlight of your comments were you're prioritizing the monitoring network development. And that's something I had thought of as well. And I want to identify, or I want to see identified, the tasks within the other two suggested projects that overlap with this monitoring. So exactly, focusing on the monitoring. From my understanding, I tried to read the first part of the 3-part intersurface water connected guidance document. So I understand that groundwater elevation is important. So there's certain data that'll be collected in these other tasks that will benefit the ISW study. And the ISW, the interconnected surface water, is probably the best one, the most eligible for grant funding. And I want to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sean. I think that was really good to summarize.
I have one more question here I
Sure,
forgot
go right
to
ahead.
ask, sorry. Laura, I know at one point, I mean, you had a number of meetings about establishing these sort of nested piezometer transects across the valley floor. We gave you access to those sites. And that seemed like a significant number of monitoring locations. Did those go in? Are they active or?
Yeah.
Okay.
These are the ones that I was mentioning. Those are active. Some of them have been funded through DWR.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just need to wait maybe 1 or 2 years to really get the sense in order to make them RMPs. So those are active and are collecting data. They may need a little bit of maintenance now just because, but I think Audra, we got all the data for
I see.
for this annual report. Yeah, so they are
Just
there.
so, more is an ambiguous number. To get it where you would be, in comfortable thinking we had enough of them, what is that number? Like, how many more of those do you think? Because you were so instrumental in the modeling. I mean, I know a good nerd always wants more, but I'm right there with you. But like, how many more do you think we need to have something that is actually, you feel comfortable with?
Sean, that's a great question. And I would kind of think about it in we want to be efficient, right? So it's not really the number, it might be the location and the depth.
Mm-hmm.
So the new ones, a lot of the new ones were very shallow. So honestly, it would be great to get the information from the well inventory about where are the wells screened, where from which aquifer the pumping is happening, for example. The geology has a lot of uncertainty, and then use that, do some reverse engineering to really see where are the information that we have so far, and just map them out based on location and pumping and really the groundwater use. So it might really not be more than the 3 or 4 at the most that I mentioned earlier.
I mean, that is wildly attainable.
I think so. I mean, I don't think I'm asking, being a modeler, I should ask for the moon, right? But no, I want to be very reasonable. So I would keep open the option of 3 or 4 more points that might be in critical location at specific depth.
All right. And do we know if the cross-section nested units, were those included in the GSP and DWR's assessment of what we had, or did they kind of come after the fact and were not part of what was included as far as analyzing our GSP? Because previously we only had like those 4 old ones.
Yeah, they kind of came too late, Sean.
What's that?
So they came too late.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, so again, this is where a corrective action has actually transpired, right? So, we're acting like we haven't done anything, and we've actually already added. How many transects are there? There's 2, right, Laura?
Yeah, 2.
2. So since our GSP was analyzed, we've actually addressed this, right? So we went from 4 to, how many are in each series? 3 or 4?
That was a little it didn't work out in the way we planned
I
with
see.
someone. So maybe we want to revisit and see if we can make them in as we were really planning at the beginning.
Yeah. So how
But
many
yeah,
did you add in those nested transects?
I think we have three wells in one. We have 3 wells in both, and one of the wells is the DWR, the one with the multi components,
Yeah.
multi.
So we've added 6. Is that what you're
Mhm.
saying in total?
Yeah.
Right. So we went from 4 to 10 since our GSP was analyzed. So I mean, that to me is already meaningful progress. And if we added 4 more, we would go to 14. And adding 4 more is just not that big of a deal. And when we look at these things that we have to do, we've already done them, actually. That is one of the things that's already been done. And I think we all need to just sort of step back and go like, when we go forward for 2027, it's not like we've just been hiding in the corner since our GSP was submitted. We've already made like meaningful progress on this task, and I would absolutely support adding 4 more because it's just not that expensive, and it's also very inexpensive for the care and feeding, and that's what really is the absolute nuts and bolts of what this whole compliance program is about, is understanding groundwater elevations and are we, depleting our aquifer. And this is not expensive. We've already made meaningful progress, and it's just very doable. All right,
Well said.
I'll shut up about this
No,
one.
that was
Thank
well
you.
said. Thank you. One of the thoughts I've had and monitoring the conversations about groundwater and GSAs across the state and what's going to be expected in the 5-year evaluations is that we need to be showing progress in these various areas of deficiencies, but the progress is going to be driven by capacity and the capacity of funding, the capacity of implementing the work, of finding the right locations. And as we have seen in this meeting, just the conversation of, hey, we've got this network, we can do this, and et cetera, just putting some pieces together. And I appreciate reminding us that we have been progressing since we submitted the GSP. So we are on track in that way. Again, I support prioritizing actions that overlap in the needed improvements, focusing on the monitoring network and identifying areas where we can have grant funding. Joe, I know this is your first meeting and I appreciate you jumping on a speeding train. Would you, since monitoring is really up your alley, would you like to make any comments at this time? You can also hold off if you prefer.
Well, I actually had just 2 questions. One is, of the 6 RMPs, how many of those have the continuous sensors? And then my second question is, with regard to gathering the data on the well depths and the screen depths, is that a real difficult effort or a heavy lift, or is that data that's easily mined? Thanks.
I can speak to the network quickly, Laura, if that's helpful, and then I'll pass off.
Yeah.
So CLSI has a continuous sensor on one of the RMP sites, Ukiah Valley 10A. I would like to work with Laurel to improve data sharing there. I think that'll be even better. And then we do have a UVB GSA installed continuous sensor on a second RMP location. I believe there have also been discussions among TAC regarding potentially using some funding to install another continuous sensor in at least one more of the RMP locations that we'll talk about later has had some excursions below one of the thresholds. All right.
John, did you have an answer
Yeah.
to Joe's question as well? Okay, let me, Audra and Laura, were you done answering the question?
I just the second part of the question was about the effort that goes into this well inventorying and finding the information. I think it really depends on how the community work with us and how fast can we be on gathering the information that we have, because unfortunately what we found out in the all the DWR website where the well logs are saved. For a lot of the well logs for Ukiah Valley, we really didn't have the information, so we couldn't really gather anything more than what we have right now. So we need a little bit of a community engagement. That's the thing.
Sean has a clarifying question. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was done beating this one to death. One more round of flogging. So on those nested ones that we put in, only one of them is currently continuously monitoring, is that correct?
They are all continuous, right, Audra?
Oh,
Yeah, that's right. So, yep, we have one that has 3 completions in it. That's continuously monitored. And then we have a second that has actually 4 completions. And then we have 3 additional sites that were funded by the technical support services that also have a continuous sensor, but they are single completion.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. So for the nested wells, those
Yeah.
are all of the different complete, separate well casings. Those are all continuously monitored.
Okay, that I understood. All right, great.
Uh-huh.
And then are all the old ones now, the 4 that used to be read twice a year, are those all continuous now as well, or just that
No.
one by the river?
Just one, Audra, right? So it would be good, probably, Sean, to enhance those ones and think about having a continuous, because anyway, it's gonna be as cheaper for the GSA on the long run.
I totally agree. I think we should just figure out what that actual cost is and make that occur.
I kind of have a ballpark. I just worked on this yesterday. So if we want telemetry, which is even better because we can really see every day, I think including installation is no more than 4,000 or 5,000. Depends if it's an easy well. Sometimes it's just a few hours of work, and the instruments with telemetry is 2,500 roughly.
Yeah, I mean,
think
if we
more
can
than
harvest
affordable.
a whole new legion of data for $5,000 a site, we
Yeah.
should absolutely be doing that. Like,
I
stat.
thought we'd been talking about this for quite some time. I know we went from twice a year to monthly during the drought, but I thought we were having conversations back then about making them continuous.
I
Eric,
believe
do
we
you-
were, but apparently it's not occurring.
Okay,
Not
well-
to anybody's fault, but this is my moment to say, like, we need to actually
need
do
to do
this.
that. Let's let Eric respond to that.
So yes, to clarify, we have been discussing it, and at the board level, in the first half of the fiscal year, so between August and December, we did bring this up a couple times, and even before that. And so we have been working towards that, and the challenge has been that budget-wise, we're tight, right? And so the hope is that if we prioritize this as part of the fee study, and this is a cost that we would like to be included in the fee study, to be funded by the fee study, right? Then that would bring in the proper funding to then do that work, bring that in, have that data start coming in more continuously, and then have that data be used as part of the periodic evaluation to show more data.
So what I'm hearing is it was a budget constraint.
There are budget constraints that we're handling right now, yes.
Okay. So is it something you anticipate can be addressed soon?
Yes, I believe so.
Laura, I'll get to you next too. Sean, did you want to?
I mean, to me, in the current, without the fee study, right, we're just billing members for annual costs. And I would be so happy to split this cost if the GSA just sent out a request to the members. I mean, it's going to be like $4,000 a member for getting data like right now, instead of burying it in this thing that clearly is going to be a bit of a journey and then take time to implement. If we're in a big hurry to show progress by 2027, this one to me is cheap, low-hanging fruit that we just need to like.
I would support that.
I agreed, and if you recall, when the GSA took time to contract with RCD to get the monthly readings instead of twice a year, the flood control district actually took action on that and paid up front to get it going. So I agree. Eric, I think another action item out of this is we need quick response on the continuous monitoring versus the monthly, although wonderful monthly readings by RCD. Before we go on to Laurel, Joe, did you have any follow-up on your question? Thank you, that was great. Eric?
I would just like to thank Sean and the rest of the TAC for recognizing that this needs to be done as soon as possible, and I will bring this to the April board meeting and have the board consider this for approval.
Okay, great. Laurel?
I already have funding for 3 new wells to be instrumented with continuous monitoring and telemetry.
I think you said that a few times before, haven't you?
I really have, and everybody keeps acting like we have to go find new money.
Yeah,
So
I'm a little surprised, that we're sitting on this. So that's another priority, that again, thank you,
So
Laurel.
what I would really like is suggestions from Laura and Eric of what wells you want to put this in.
Okay, so that sounds like a great offline meeting for a brain trust there.
Yes, and then also I need to make sure that the GSA knows that they will inherit these and have to maintain them once
the
grant ends.
And so that will be in the ongoing costs of maintenance cost for the GSA to be considered in the budget annually. All right. Let's see, we have not yet heard from, and I wanted to make note, Sonoma Water Representative Stephen Maples has joined us. Thank you, Stephen. I'm not sure what time you joined, but we'll get that in. And let's see, online we have, of our TAC members, we have Javier, we have Stephen, Laurel we've heard from, and we have Amber. And in the room we have Ken Todd. So Javier, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I don't have much I haven't really thought this through, but I do have some concerns. I have some concerns, but I also I'm mostly wrapped up around the interconnected surface water stuff and the data that's needed around that determination, or whatever that I was reading through DWR's guidance as well, and I just saw it. So I'm focused kind of on that because of the issues around the Russian River and Lake Mendocino that the tribes have concerns around, and that's water availability for tribal beneficial uses, which haven't been brought up because that isn't in the basin yet. But there are those activities and concerns that have been expressed to me by tribal members. So there is that, the interconnectedness between the groundwater depletions or usage and the Russian River usage as well. So I haven't heard too much around the data that's needed for that evaluation either. And I also have questions around how many more wells are needed to get a good idea of what's going on in the basin. So that's just my thoughts. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Let's go. Ken, you want to go next? Do you have any comments on the expanded monitoring network? There you go.
I thought Sean answered most of my questions I had. Laurel mentioned she's been monitoring wells since 15, so we have some kind of a history of what our groundwater has been doing. I think that, like Sean mentioned, is the priority of this whole organization. Data collecting, does that save any money as far as labor for people going out doing it physically? The telemetry?
Yeah, it saves labor. Having it telemetered and automated not only saves money as far as people having to go out and check, but it provides way higher resolution of information. That said, RCD, I think, has been great. I don't know what the right word is. Stewards of this little project, and as someone that has many telemetered things in their workplace, telemetry is an electronic thing in the field, which generally means it doesn't work all the time. And I would totally be in favor of keeping the RCD sort of, as sort of our local neutral, high quality little agency that we have in our quiver as the maintainer of these robots.
Okay. That offset cost, and that would relate, to me, that would relate to with that constant inflow of groundwater levels. But tell us a lot about this, the surface water, how it relates. To me, that almost solves two problems at the same time. So that to me has got to be a definite priority to get that in as quick as possible.
That with the additional stream flow gauges that Laura was talking about, I think will give us a good picture.
And adding 4 more wells shouldn't be any problem. I'm sure there's many growers who would love to participate in that if they're asked, use their wells.
Do you think?
Most of them have logs, when they drill them, how deep they are and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and do you think the additional engagement by the agricultural community with the rate and fee study as they're learning about the impacts of that, do you think that will encourage them to be more forthcoming in sharing information?
Sure. Yeah.
That's great.
Absolutely. I'll help sell it to them that you can either pay a lot more or you can hand over something that you've already paid for.
There you go.
We've had wells on vineyards I've managed that have been monitored for years by the city. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we don't have that vineyard anymore, but I don't know if that's one of them that's still being monitored by this group.
We couldn't tell you because it's all anonymous.
We didn't even know they were monitoring until somebody showed up in the state one time, and here they are. Anyway.
Thank you, Ken. That's very, very helpful. I think we've heard from everyone up here, and so that leaves Amber and Stephen, or if it's not just Amber, anyone from the county. I see we have a couple county folks on the line. Either of you have any comments on the monitoring network?
I don't have a whole lot more to add that hasn't already been said. It seems like what we have here in the response from DWR is nothing we didn't already know. It's nothing new. It's basically what we anticipated. I had very similar thoughts to Sean in reading the letter, that it's all should and recommended. And I don't know if that's just DWR's way of saying you shall nicely, or if it truly is recommended. I don't know the answer to that. Dominic just raised his hand, so I think maybe he has the answer.
Let's hear from Dominic, if you don't mind, Amber.
Yeah, hi, good
Dominic,
morning.
can you just
can you
clarify, Dominic, can you clarify for the audience where you're from, who you are?
Yeah, can you hear me first off?
Yes, we can definitely hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Dominic. I'm with the Department of Water Resources. I'm in our North Central region office, and I'm the Sigma point of contact. So I am Ukiah's specific contact person with the department. And just to make sure I had this language right, I actually double checked with people in the meeting while you were talking up the chain. So although it does say, or doesn't say shall or must and says should or recommend, we are going to be looking at those items when we're doing the 5-year update review. So that's the thing to consider. The other thing is we don't want this to be confusing, and we're cognizant of the current budget environment that you're dealing with. So to that end, if you would like a specific meeting with our office to help you prioritize and kind of understand our priorities as far as where each item ranks, we're happy to do that. We don't want there to be any confusion there. And then my other things I wanted to tell you. Well, is that, first off, does that clarify that a little bit?
I think that's very helpful, and actually an esteemed member of our agricultural community who could not be here this morning actually asked me, why can't we just ask DWR what we should prioritize and to what degree? So that was on my list of questions today. So I would like to say yes, please. Yep. And if you could coordinate that meeting with Eric, and I'll talk to Eric about who should be in that meeting as well. If you're interested in being in that meeting, let me know, TAC members, etc. And Dominic, did you think of your third point?
Yeah, so one, that's great. I'll coordinate that. We're very consciously kind of keeping the points of contact away from the whole review process. And so that's why I can't give you that prioritization right now, but I will set up that meeting. And the other thing that I just remembered is we're also aware that that well was destroyed. That was one of our wells that was unfortunately destroyed. And so we just think it's great that you have the RCD and these other resources to lean on to get more data. And I do have some updates as well if there's time at the end of the meeting, but I know that time is short, so I'll leave it there for now.
Actually, I do think we have you agendized. We do have you agendized for later, I think. Oh, well, we'll get you on there anyway. Zach, Zach, I do see your hand up, but I want to call on our last TAC member that has not yet spoken on this item, and then we'll go to you. Stephen from Sonoma Water.
Hey, thanks, Beth. Yeah, just a couple comments. I think a lot of the points that I want to hit on here have already been said. You know, I completely agree with what Javier said about you know, prioritizing groundwater surface water interaction, sort of independent of the entire GSP compliance process. I think it'd just be prudent to do that, considering the potential changes in the future with Potter Valley. You know, Sonoma Water, we're working on doing some modeling to try to anticipate what the storage levels and potential releases from Lake Mendocino would look like under future run-of-the-river conditions with the Potter Valley project, or without diversions from the Potter Valley project entirely. And so it changes the water balance for the entire upper Russian River pretty substantially. And given what we know about groundwater surface water interactions in the system, then that also cascades into the groundwater system as well. So I think being proactive and trying to anticipate you know, how those changes may affect the groundwater system in the Ukiah Basin is a good idea. And it's something that Sonoma Water is definitely interested in collaborating with the GSA on kind of sharing results and things. The other thing, I completely agree about just leveraging any existing wells that we have. It's great to hear about those nested piezometers. One question I had thinking about the Bureau of Reclamation grant that CLSI got recently, you know, there was some discussion in there about pump tests. And I'm curious if there's a potential to, during those pump tests, to monitor any of those multi-level wells to look at the interaction between the deeper aquifer system and the shallow aquifer system. You know, I think that will help us better understand how isolated pumping in that deeper aquifer system is from the other shallower aquifer system. So that's just one question. And other than that, I think everything else has been kind of touched on.
Thanks, Stephen. I would encourage and request that Laurel and Stephen discuss that question offline. I think that would be a good collaboration. Another great brain trust. Laura, I do see your hand up, but Zach had his hand up first. Did you have a response to Stephen's question?
Yeah, it's a quick response. Actually, Stephen, great point. I want to point out that we were talking about groundwater data collection, but because we are talking about different level, that's what I was trying, different depth, I think this data will help not only for the groundwater monitoring network, you know better than me, will also help, these transects will help with interconnected surface water. So it's kind of, they will be designed in a way that hopefully they will give us information for both. And the ones that we already did, you were part of the effort.
Right.
They were in location where hopefully we'll be able to see also something about these the gradients between the different aquifers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and deliver.
So Laura, what I'm hearing is what I mentioned earlier, that some of these actions will benefit other projects. So even if we're not funding a full-on ISW study, there will be progress in that area. Okay, great. That's what we're looking for.
That's the idea.
Sean, did you have a comment before Zach? Was it relevant for the
I just,
topic?
with Sonoma on the Zoom now, this is one of my other things as I was going through the list of things, and they brought up ISW study. I feel like it was quite a while ago now, like maybe 4 years ago or something. Sonoma was partnering with USGS on doing exactly this, and actually Mendocino County actually contributed at least a minor bit to that long study. And it seems to have sort of been forgotten as far as this process goes, and I was just wondering if there was any information on where that is.
So how's it
Yeah,
going, Stephen?
so yeah, so that project, as you described, has been delayed substantially. The major component of that is development of a watershed-wide GS flow model. And I know Laura and her team worked with USGS to make sure that the model domain and grid spacing of the GSA's model is coincident with the USGS model. Anyway, that's all to say, we, I feel like I've said this before, but the release of the model is dependent on the development of a report. USGS is imminently submitting the report to a journal, so that is kind of an accelerated way that they can release the report in a journal article format. And then once that is done, then we should be able to get our hands on the model. So it will, I am confident that we'll have it at some point here in 2024. It's part
so?
of, what's that?
You really think so?
I think so.
Okay, well, we're going to take your word for it. We're all going to hope for the best. Stephen, if you get wind of that article going in, would you please send me a link to that, and I will make sure it gets distributed among the community here.
And
I mean, it's going to get submitted, and it has to go through the review process.
Absolutely,
so,
Of course. But, I mean, again, though, right, if we're looking at what was available when the GSP was turned in and incremental progress for 2027, again, I don't want us to just duck and hide until 2027, but now we have Laurel's ISW work, and we'll have a new thing from USGS, which we're not going to be able to do better than that. I mean, those are two, again, major pieces of incremental progress for 2027 that we can demonstrate has occurred.
Great,
yeah,
thank you.
I agree, Sean.
So I want to thank Zach for being so patient. Zach, you are next, and you are welcome to be anonymous other than your name on the screen, or you can tell us if you're speaking in representation of anyone in any group today. Take it away.
I think I'm just speaking on the basis of being a farmer, but it's just a short comment. In light of the cost basis currently looking high, I'm really happy to hear a lot of talk right now about prioritization and getting some clarification maybe from Dominic about those items that are the highest priority. What I haven't heard yet, so I just wanted to interject into the conversation, is just a recognition that it's not all about 2027. It's a 20-year time frame, if I remember correctly, and extensions potentially available on that. So let's not be the hare racing to the finish line here. It's okay to be the tortoise and do everything correctly and thoughtfully along the way.
Thank you, Zach. Good reminder. Audra, could you advance to the next? Actually, let's go to well inventory next, I think, based on Sean, unless there's any objection. I think based on Sean's comments, I'd like to take well inventory, and then we'll do the ISW last. So again, we're going to go to the various TAC members. Sean, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Again, I do think this is an important one, and I've heard it characterized a lot recently, in particular during the fee study, as being tedious, which I imagine it would be extraordinarily tedious. But as any old person up here would know that's been around a minute, this is why interns were invented and graduate students, right? I think paying a seasoned professional to rifle through either filing the DWR or here at county permitting, it would be expensive and accelerate the cost in the fees study. But I can't tell you how many times in the past we've used exactly that, really good quality interns or grad students or other people to do this sort of thing and had really great results. And to me, this is another really big baseline chunk of what we really need to understand if we're really going to do what this bit of legislation intends, and dismissing it as annoying is not really serving us well in the long run. You know, again, I know we need to do other things in the short term, but I do think this is something that we to do, you know, sort of take Zach's approach, if you will, taking our time and doing it actually correctly. I think this is another underpinning that we really just need to acknowledge that it will be tedious and annoying and start chipping away at it.
All right. How about you next, Laurel? Anything to say about tedious?
Sure. You know what I would find really helpful, since we collect data from most of the growers in this area through the fish-friendly farming program, is if somebody would take these purpose and tasks and put them into a data sheet that they want the growers to fill out. Because in some instances, the growers have information on how deep that well is, and sometimes they don't. It just really depends. You know, I also think we have to anonymize the well location, which is proposed here, and we could get some very good feedback, particularly if the growers can relate filling out a data sheet to not having to pay somebody else to do it through that, you know, through these fees that are proposed. So I'd be willing to help with that, but I would really need something from maybe Eric or Laura that's just an easy to fill out form.
I think that's a great idea. So it's a data request form for pumpers, which would be voluntary and anonymous. Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you. Let's see. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Sean said. Just looking at the cost, I was like, wow, I almost felt like I wanted to go down to the county and volunteer myself to start chipping away at it. Yeah, I think it is important information that we need, and I also think it doesn't need to be that complicated.
Great. Javier, any thoughts? I see you're on camera now. Nice background, by the way.
Thank you. No, I don't have any thoughts right now. Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. Ken, why don't we go to you, and then we'll go to Joe.
I think the well inventory is important because when we see aquifers starting to deplete or whatever, we know where the wells are. I mean, that tells us a whole lot. I don't know if you heard that, but having these wells inventoried is, I think, important because we got to have a relationship between the wells and the monitoring wells and how they react. So whatever we can do to get the well inventory, easiest possible way, great.
Okay.
Important part of it.
Thank you. Joe?
Shift gears a little bit to the characterization of the subsurface geology. And I think it was last year when DWR had the helicopter coming through the valley with a big hexagon. And I'm wondering if that information is available to Laura and her team.
It is, yeah.
Yes, it's available on the public.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like that that bullet item should be something that can be answered fairly reasonably with those experts. That's all, thanks.
Yeah, great, thank you. I just want to, I have a question about the well inventory. In reading so many documents, can't remember which one at this point, but it seemed to be there was an identification of certain more high-risk areas. Redwood Valley comes to mind. I believe maybe the east side of the river, maybe around the Talmadge area. I, again, can't remember exactly where I read that in the documentation, but is there, and this may be getting too in the weeds, so just tell me, but would there be an approach where we could prioritize those high-risk areas rather than trying to kind of take on everything at once and almost run it like a little pilot project as well? Like, what do we, cut our teeth on Redwood Valley and the west and the east side or something? Laura, Audra?
I think Beth, that's a good idea. And we have done it in this way with starting with smaller area in other basins where we were looking for the same information. So I can share easily with Laura the type of survey that we put together and go from there and start from smaller communities. And I really like Sean ideas of using interns or students. I was actually thinking of looking into cooperative extension, and the new person that is working there might be a good task for her for getting to know the community, actually.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see, online of our TAC members. Amber, I know we haven't heard from you. Stephen, I can't remember if we've heard from you on this issue, and Laurel, you already made comments. Amber?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I think this is important, and it is part of filling some data gaps. When I was reviewing the stuff before the meeting, I was kind of looking at this table that's included from a point of view of, where you get the most bang for your buck and where there's the most, I think somebody said something earlier about overlapping benefit. And it doesn't seem like this is one of those where you have overlapping benefit, according to this table at least. Although there is a comment about needing this information as a critical component of implementing the fee. And since that's really important to us right now for the financial security of the GSA, maybe it does need to be prioritized. That being said, with Dominic offering to help us prioritize, I almost wonder why we're even trying to prioritize right now. It seems like maybe we need to do that, have that meeting before we make any big decisions about what to do next or what to recommend to the board to do next.
That's a fair comment. My initial response to that is the intent of Sigma is to empower local agencies, right? It's a locally driven. And every interaction that I've had with DWR on Sigma is that they are there to support, but they want to respect that it is a local initiative. So Dominic may want to comment or he may prefer not to, but I still think that it is important for us to discuss the various aspects of these deficiencies or improvements, if we're going to look at the positive side of things, so that all of the members also understand and the public understands, and then obviously take advantage of DWR Dominic's offer to help us prioritize. But again, I didn't hear him say, we'll tell you which one. But we're still going to have to advise the board because they're going to have to make the decision of how to set that cost basis for the rate and fees. So I appreciate that, Amber, and we will definitely, I think we should all keep that in mind too. Laura?
Yeah, very, very quick response, Amber. We already tried to kind of really nail down to which are the key components that would really give us the information that we need on the long term to improve the model. And once we have an improved model and improved data, it's gonna be much easier down the road to make a decision on other more complex and more expensive projects. So I think what we have, what it's in here, like the well inventory, is kind of might not be something that in the way it's written as a title really would be a priority right away for DWR, but some of these are part of the requirements that we didn't have in the past. And so we are trying to kind of fill in for the future. So I just, the main thing is that we really try to be very, very cautious and not go over too much. I understand that you want to have, you want to move to the expensive and complex projects once you have a solid response from DWR eventually.
Thanks, Laura. Stephen, I think you are the last. Well, oh, actually, let's hear from Dominic on this since he's willing.
Yeah, I just want to highlight what you said about, well, the discussion around local control, right? Like that is how Sigma is structured, and we respect that. So I don't think we want to be directing what kind of your board should be directing. But I think the goal of this meeting will be to share the priorities that we'll have when we're doing the review. And then one thing I don't think I necessarily said explicitly, Zach kind of mentioned this, but just looking over my conversation with people higher up the chain is that we're looking for progress towards sustainability on that 5-year update. So, you know, Sigma is a long, important project. Anyhow, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Dominic. I would encourage everyone, if you're really a Sigma nerd, as nerd has been brought up before, a few weeks ago, one of the state assembly committees held a hearing, I think it was a joint hearing between 2 committees, on the 10-year anniversary of Sigma. I'm going to make sure that Eric has that link and posts it on the Ukiah Valley Basin GSA webpage as a resource. It is a long meeting, and you can fast forward because it's a recording, but it is very helpful. You hear directly from Paul Goslin on, commenting on, particularly on what's expected from the 5-year evaluations or updates, as they're often called. So again, I think it is about progress, and it will be very helpful to get feedback from DWR on prioritizing based on the funding that we have access to, whether that be grants or rate and fees or member contributions. Stephen, did you have any comment on the well inventory?
I mean, this data is really valuable. The only comment I have, and maybe it's more of a question for Dominic, is I know there's a renewed effort in the basin characterization program from DWR, which was which helps kind of compile this information along with the SkyTem geophysics data that was collected here. And I know that DWR is planning to do more with those data. So anything that's done here by the GSA, I just want to make sure it's not, doing something that DWR is already planning to do. You don't want to duplicate work or spend money and resources for something that DWR may end up doing in the future. So that's the only comment I have.
Great, thank you, Stephen. I would like to just convey one comment. There was a letter submitted very early this morning from the Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and it was submitted to the GSA staff and copied to me. We'll make sure that that is uploaded onto the website under today's agenda materials, as well as the previous 2 letters submitted to from the Farm Bureau. I believe those were addressing the GSA board. But in this letter, it is addressed to the TAC. And one of the issues that is brought up, it's a longer letter, I'm not going to try to read it, but regarding this was the concern that one of the justifications for the well inventory was to refine the rate and fee study in the future. And does anyone, Eric, do you have just a couple sentences about that? I don't want to dig in the weeds, but I do want to address this concern of the farm bureaus.
No, thank you, Beth. So as we've pointed out in the previous board meeting and at the workshop yesterday, that there is concern about equity with the fee structure that's been proposed, in that we don't always have, in quite a few circumstances, a clear understanding of what people are extracting at the parcel level, but we have a reasonable estimate of what's being extracted within the group level. So like group 2 is the cropland, agriculture, in this particular case, since it's Farm Bureau asking about this. And so the well inventory could be helpful potentially in that if we have that anonymized data and information, that information could be used to then try to understand and provide a better estimate of that extraction at the group level. At the parcel level, we need to think about that a little bit more, because I think there could be some concerns about, how anonymous would that be at that point. So I just want to highlight that for the record, that we will have to think through that. But it could be helpful in helping characterize at the group level a better refined understanding of the extractions that are being done within the group 2 at the cropland. Catherine, do you have any other comments from your perspective from the fee structure? Catherine said no. Okay.
Okay, and I know that this will be further discussed at the board level, but I want to encourage all the TAC members to read that letter later. And the Farm Bureau did apologize it got in so late, but it does have quite a few points in it, and it's definitely worth a read. So thank you on that. So we have one last, to the ISW study slide, please, Audra. And we have a break coming up in about 10 minutes. I'd like to take a 10-minute break, so if we could cut out a little bit early, that'd be great. Does anyone have further, we have discussed the ISW quite a bit. Rather than call on each of the TAC members, does anyone have anything else they would like to add about it? I'm seeing no from Joe. Adam, nothing? Ken? John, are you still thinking? No? Okay. Stephen or Laurel or Amber, do you have anything else to add? Laurel, go ahead.
This is sort of one of those big questions. I do understand the concept that groundwater supports different types of ecosystems. And I understand that groundwater and surface water interact in different basins in different ways at different times of the year. However, there seems to be an assumption that if we were not using groundwater, we would have wetlands and riparian habitats all over the place, these groundwater dependent ecosystems. And this does not take into account the fact that the Russian River is 25 feet lower, and therefore the summer groundwater level is lower because of a whole bunch of historic activities. So I guess my question is, when we're looking at this, are we looking at it in this 20-year backcast historic condition that's used for all the rest of the Sigma modeling? Or are we thinking that we're going to somehow achieve a condition that is more like pre-dam? In other words, what's the real goal of this? Because we have a great big limitation on how you can get tributaries to grow riparian species. I have done experiments in Ukiah Valley on this, and you cannot, the trees grow better away from the river than near the river on these tributaries because of the rapid change in stage associated with the dam operations. So I'd just like to understand a little better, what we're trying to get at here.
Laura, do you have any, or Audra?
So I think what we need to kind of go back a little bit to the really just the Sigma and what we had in the GSP, right? So you are totally right, Laurel. And Sigma does not require to go back to pre-development. So that's not what we are looking for. I think these studies mostly because in the way we brought the GSPs, if you remember, we were really lacking information because we didn't have many data. And you understand better than me, Laurel, that with those data twice per year was almost impossible to really come up with reasonable numbers for the sustainable management criteria. So what we brought in the GSP was, let's start somewhere, and then we will collect more information to just refine these numbers. So the numbers that we were using, I think we had a lot of discussion, and that was really good with Sonoma Water when we did that, and we were looking at the lowest values, and but having only 3 or 4 years of data, you don't have much of a statistics, right? So our problem was, we need to have a longer set of data so we can refine those numbers. And it's clearly written in the GSP that we want to most likely change those SMCs, because those criteria, they were based on, actually, also they were based mostly on the 3 years of the drought.
Yeah.
Because those were the years where we have the data. So they were really skewed, and they were not telling us the entire story. So here it's a question really of trying to understand what's happening. We don't now. We can't. I mean, can we fill up the Russian River for 25 feet? I don't think so, right? I got it from another basin, actually, where I think, let's just throw stuff there and fill up the river. It's not feasible, right?
That's been tried. Yeah. There's lots of car bodies from the Army Corps of Engineers and other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, that clarifies.
if that clarifies, I think here is really going, like, because of the way we wrote the plan, and we just said we will be revamping those numbers because those numbers are not meaningful.
Okay. And in terms of what the Bureau of Reclamation grant will do, it's really looking at the interaction between groundwater pumping and flows in the Russian River. And as somebody said, we're going to be doing a longitudinal profile from the outlet of the dam down to the Hopland Gauge, which is the basin. So we haven't had that information before because nobody ever surveys. But how that gets interpreted as to its effects on these systems is a lot of speculation for the most part. So that will be kind of, I think, a difficult step to make as to whether there is a way that we could improve something for these groundwater dependent ecosystems. So that, and one other thing I wanted to say about Bureau of Reclamation grant is we will be having meetings that will include a lot of the folks on this panel. So everybody will get their chance to talk.
Thanks, Laurel. I see, Dominic, do you have a comment that is towards this topic?
Yeah,
Okay, go
just
ahead.
that Javier had brought up reading one of our papers that DWR released. And so I just wanted to highlight again that we have 3 guidance documents that are coming out this year. And unfortunately, the first 2 got pushed a bit back, but the last paper that's planned to be released in the fall is still on schedule, and they're all scheduled to be released this year. So again, one is out already, and they're found on our best management practices and guidance documents. And I'll send an email to Eric either today or tomorrow with links to all the resources that I've kind of mentioned and things I've mentioned. So again, thanks for bringing that up, Javier.
Yeah, that's great. And several of us have started reading or have read that first guidance document. It's a lot to get through, but if you take your time, and there's some really good diagrams and pictures and whatnot, it's very helpful to understand what this study would look like. Stephen?
Yeah, the only thing I just wanted to follow up on Laurel's comment about measuring like a longitudinal survey of flows in the Ukiah Basin. I think that'd be really valuable. It's something that Sonoma Water started doing last summer in the Alexander Valley. So basically during a single day, we floated the Russian River and took discharge measurements along the longitudinally downstream. And what you see is this really, even if you have 2 gauges here and here at the upper and downstream ends, there's a lot of variability that occurs even within there where the river is losing and gaining. And so even if you can't attribute those gains and losses to any particular source or sink, it's really valuable in elucidating just how groundwater surface water interaction is occurring in the basin. So it's something I definitely would encourage if there's time and resources available for that.
Great, thank you, Sean.
I'm not sure this is related, but are we intending to go to like sort of the updates after the break?
For the projects?
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm hoping you and Laurel will give us a good update on your project, yeah?
Yeah, Laura will. So before we go on break, if we could, I think it'd be really informative for all of us just to go back to page 10 of this presentation really briefly. The anticipated improvements identified in the GSP slide. Because I know there's been like a lot of concern, in particular as part of the fee study, that we're not going to be compliant in 2027. You know, we heard today from DWR, we don't need to be done, but we do need to be making incremental improvement as we get there. And if you look at this list, the top bullet, we're not doing great there. But the rest of these bullets, we are doing actually really well. We have expanded our network. We have included continuously recording instrumentation, and we are going now at the direction of today's meeting, do that. The ISW monitoring, that is happening both through Laurel and Sonoma USGS Mendocino partnership that is hopefully coming out here soon. Stream network and hydrolog data is also happening through Laurel's work. So we are making already incremental progress, just as we are now. And just as we look at developing what our annual budget is to make sure we are in compliance with our next report, which is in 2027. We've blown a big hole in this list already, and we are really just now getting started. And I think some of these other ones, in particular, this well construction information and well inventory, is something that we can do, also reasonably inexpensive. I'm not really sure what this water budget item is. I'm happy to talk offline because I think, at least for the municipal side, this is very easy to do. It's something we literally report every year. Everybody does, so I don't understand what the missing piece is there. But anyways, I just think it's important to look at this and go like, you know, we are getting things done right now. And I think if we go to looking at our PMAs as well, we're making progress in those. And I think we're on good footing. I don't think there's anything to be necessarily, you know, concerned about some giant vacuum of noncompliance that will get us all in trouble in 2027. That's it.
That's great. Thank you for that summation and articulation. I think the only other thing that and I did stress, we're not talking about setting rate and fees. We are discussing the impacts of those rate and fees by the projects that, and actions that we're talking about. I want to stress what I believe is an importance on the financing side of these efforts. Again, taking advantage of everything we've heard today of this network, not just the monitoring network, but the human network, right? We're talking about it. We're identifying multiple resources here that can be incorporated into our work. And again, just stressing the importance of identifying actions that need to be taken that could be funded through grants, and also to consider the capacity of the GSA and its consultants and staff to undertake some of this. So I don't want to see items that are earmarked to be done and budgeted, but we're actually not even going to be able to get to them in a particular fiscal year. So I think what's really important also as a further action from today's conversation is a little bit more of a detailed and bite-sized, digestible timeline so that the board can really see what parts of this, of our recommendations today could be completed or started, initiated really, and worked in progress being made throughout the next few years. Because they're going to need that information in order to identify how to set that annual cost basis. Are there any final comments on the topic? And we can bring this up again in the second half of the meeting if people feel like they've, in 10-minute break, they've got more to say. But anything right now, Adam?
Yeah, kind of to Sean's point about the water budget, I think a lot of these things tie in together. And as we get more data, we can get a better idea of how everything's happening. Like with the well inventory, we can make an assumptions on what people are using. You know, they're obviously not, if it's a domestic well, they're not going to be using tens of acre feet a year. And so we can verify what our assumption is in our GSP, how close we are. And especially as we look and identify areas that may be in danger of over extraction, that then we can just make better decisions, like should we limit well drilling in certain areas, or do we need to intervene having recharge projects just to make sure that people, I mean, overall the Sigma's goal is to make sure people don't run out of water. I mean, it's pretty basic. And so I think we are making pretty good progress in doing that.
Thanks, Adam. Any last thoughts, PAC members? I just want to sum too that the outcome of this discussion item was to have recommendations that will be brought forth to the board. And I would like to suggest that Sean and I, as the chair and vice chair, meet with the staff and consultants to formulate. I've kept a pretty good list. I'm sure others have as well, plus the meeting's recorded. So we can help prepare some sort of presentation, slideshow, whatever. But honestly, I think we should just show clips of what you just summarized for us, Sean. That pretty much does it. Eric, did you have a final thing right before we go to break?
Just my sincere thanks to the TAC for this discussion. This is extremely helpful to me and to Catherine and to LWA. I think this is really going to be helpful and really pivotal in the next board meeting and trying to address the concerns that were expressed at the public workshop yesterday, where people were mostly concerned on cost, and so we can refine the scope of what we're proposing and then constrain those costs to be what we believe is reasonable, and then we can find a path to a fee that hopefully everyone is mutually more or less happy with. So I really appreciate everyone's discussion, and my sincere thanks.
Yes, thank you for that. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break, or I guess 9 minutes maybe. We'll come back at 11. Wait, what time is it? I've got two different things going on here.
11:21.
It's 11:21. All right, 11:41. We'll be back. Thank you.
31.
31. Thank you. Wishful thinking.
Recording stopped.
Have bud break yet?
Personally, I think everybody could benefit from the home visiting programs.
I think that as a parent now, I'm grateful for support more than I was before.
I filled out that form not knowing what I was doing. I am very, very grateful that I did it because it's really helping me a lot.
Bueno, creo que por mi parte esperaba algo totalmente diferente, como un programa más frío, por decir algo, no tan cercano a la familia. Y a través del programa nos hemos dado cuenta que también pasa a ser una familia con nosotros porque nos apoya en los momentos difíciles o cuando nos hemos visto en dificultades.
Well, I was a new mom and I had no experience taking care of a newborn.
There isn't like a book on how to raise a kid.
We come from like a lot of family history of, drugs, violence, alcoholism, so we didn't want our daughter to experience any of that.
thought that a parent was supposed to be loving, nurturing, supposed to be there for their kid, you know, provide food, shelter, joy. And going in, becoming a parent for her, I had no clue how to provide that.
Cómo pensar educarla, ajá. Cómo educar a un hijo y porque pues nosotros nunca, es la primera vez que íbamos a ser padres.
What I think parents should know about home visiting is that you can learn a lot of new things and tips and tricks, how to take care of the baby and what to do, and if you're, you know, stuck in a routine and everything being monotonous, like they give you new resources and new tools how to handle parenthood.
It was nice to have them kind of guiding me, even though I was not a first-time mom. I felt like a first-time mom.
It totally blew my mind over time. So much information that I had no idea about. You know, she was straightforward when, you know, teaching me this stuff and answered any of my questions. It's just a really positive experience.
What I think that parents could benefit with the program is just having someone here for you, especially for first-time parents. It can be very isolating and it can be very lonely, and having the home visitor changes that and it feels very good.
For me, having a home visitor is like having a second mom there.
A lot has changed. I'm definitely more knowledgeable taking care of her. And I know that anytime I need advice or help from somebody, I can just call her.
It's just that little positive nudge to, hey, I'm noticing something, you know, let's find a way how to change it. And she's like, you know what, Amanda, let's pick you up, dust you off, and let's go over to, you know, see about either getting your driver's license or seeing about, you know, going to college, see if we can start something for you.
It's totally worth it. Like, even if you're on the fence at first, you don't feel like having a stranger coming in your house and teaching you about your little one, do it anyway. You know, you get the help that you need. You get professional advice on things you may not know about your child. The fact that the program has no fees or anything, it's all totally free, is fantastic.
Yo creo que si conozco a alguien que está próxima a ser mamá, lo primero que haría sería recomendarle el programa, porque te entrega mucho apoyo, mucha información y más que nada como apoyo emocional, una guía, te da una visión diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Sí, pues es un bonito programa, porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad, y en nuestro caso, que estamos solos en este país, ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente, y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás. Entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro, vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia, sí, para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
El objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
All right, thank you, everyone. We have almost all of our TAC members back, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Unfortunately, one of the TAC members, the one that's missing, he's out front. Yeah, thank you. We were going to go to him next. Here we are, Mr. White. Come on down. I want to hear about your project. Laurel, do you? Yes, Laurel and Sean, I was hoping that you could give us an update on, is it the Bureau of Reclamation grant? Is that what you're calling it? City of Ukiah no, that's something else. And Bureau of Reclamation grant project. So Laurel and Sean, I'll leave it to you two to kick off.
I'm leaving this to Laurel. How about it, Laurel?
Okay. So the Bureau of Reclamation grant covers a number of different things. We have finished our interview of different consultants and completed the contract. So we are now actually, in the process of working on the tasks in the grant. The portion of it that covers the city is involved with creating a new water supply well. And this is because when the city had curtailments, as everyone did, of surface water, their wells were working at full strength and they were concerned that they didn't have a backup. So this would provide some funding for the city to put in a new well. Most of the funding is actually coming from the city, and that gives us some matching money, which is always a big deal with these grants. So thank you very much, City of Ukiah and Sean, for doing this. Then there is the other part of the program, and it's a little bit more complicated. It involves taking our existing Sigma model, updating it with all of the most recent information, which is something that the GSA has to do anyway, and then incorporating a number of different sources of new information. So this would be the longitudinal profile along the Russian River. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's a measurement of the lowest point in the channel of the Thalweg. And so that gives you kind of what can define the summer groundwater level. We also will have a significant amount of involvement from growers, and we have a meeting next week to ascertain their pumping rates and the locations of the wells. The reason for this is that the question we're trying to answer is, does the pumping of groundwater in the summer affect the flow in the river? And if so, is that in particular geographic locations? Is it under certain pumping conditions? And can we then change any of the use of groundwater by agriculture in order to change any effects on the flow in the stream? Now, we're not specifically looking at tributary streams because in the summer, the majority of tributary streams to this groundwater basin are dry, where they come across the alluvium and therefore would be affected by groundwater pumping in the basin. Most of the water is up in the rocky parts of these streams, and that's actually where the steelhead would be rearing if indeed they can get to the stream. The final thing, well, a couple more, we're putting in the 3 wells with continuous monitoring equipment and telemetry. And I hope to work with both Eric and Laura and anybody else that's interested to figure out what wells you want to put that in. We also will be developing a decision support tool. So this is an online dashboard, so to speak, that will allow growers to look at a lot of the information about groundwater, surface water, curtailments, all that, so that they can make better decisions on choosing the source of water. And we would probably also want to include the Russian River flood control status in terms of water availability in that dashboard as well. Some of the interesting things they're going to be doing with the model itself is they're setting it up so that it can automatically update the dashboard. So we're trying to reduce sort of the cost of having this decision support tool. Now, nobody else has done this in the state of California, the decision support tool. So it will be kind of a model for how you can take all this information that you want growers to consider when they determine, what should I do to irrigate? What source of water should I use? And so, we'd love to have input when we get to that point. That's, probably the last year of the study rather than the first year. And I think I covered everything. Laura and Audra will be working with us on this, and maybe they have other things that I left out that they could add.
Thank you, Laurel. That was an excellent summary and very exciting. Lots of good components of that. And as you were talking, I was thinking that there's a lot of data that you'll be collecting that we can use towards these other efforts. So thank you so much. Audra, Laura, did you have anything to add?
I don't think so. We're looking forward to working with CLSI and just like Laurel mentioned, hearing from the growers in the basin. And I think this will be a neat project.
Excellent. Sean, did you have anything to add since the city is a partner in this?
Nothing really substantive. We've just released our RFP for our what we're calling our backup or redundant well. And what Laurel was saying was very accurate. Basically, during curtailment, when we felt the best way to deal with curtailment was to just basically not exercise any of our water rights that year, even our pre-14 for the most part, and just run on groundwater. We were able to do it, but literally everything was running 24 hours a day, and it became apparent that if we had had one significant mechanical failure, we would have not been in a great spot. So we just sent an RFP for helping us select a site. The city did a really good well siting study way back in 2006, and it will be largely based off that and some old other historical things that we have.
I want to point out the City of Ukiah does a great job with providing that information as the agenda packets and the materials for meetings, for city council meetings. And Sean, I think you did a great job. I think it was a consent item even, when one of the council members had questions about this.
That went long, yeah.
It did go long, but I learned a lot about the project, and the materials are great. So thanks for providing that to the public. I know there's often a lot of questions about water security, even for, human health and safety and municipal supplies.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We talk a lot about ag here, but it's good to know. Great. Any comments or questions for Laurel, Sean, etc. on this particular project? I'm not seeing any. Okay, let's see. Other members who have projects that they would like to... Oh, Amber, I'm going to put you on the spot. Anything from the county?
Yeah, we got a grant from DWR for the drought resilience plan development. And so there's currently an RFP out right now to hire a consultant to help with that. It closes, I believe, on the 29th of March, so we should have more updates at our next meeting.
Is that did you say the drought resiliency plan? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's a county-wide drought resilience plan, so it involves all agencies in the county and water stakeholders. It's not just like a county plan; it's a county-wide plan. So we will be, once we kind of get up and running, we'll be reaching out to all the stakeholders, and there should be a lot of the work will be done through the drought task force. So those meetings will pick up again, and then there will also be some other community meetings and things like that.
Okay, great. Good to know. Make sure that meeting notices get to Eric to put out to the listserv as well for the GSA. I'm sure that'll be helpful. And that was a mandatory action from one of the governor executive orders. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's from SB 552.
Well, good to know the county is stepping up and getting organized and being a fearless leader. Eric, did you have something to add to that? No. Okay. Let's see. Anyone else have projects? Adam, what about ag community or anything else? And we've got Ken Todd here from Redwood Valley too. So.
Yeah, our first well drilling at Millview property was not as successful as we'd hoped, and we're looking at proposals from Larry Walker and from Balanced Hydrologics to do some more data collecting to find out where to drill next.
Great. Laurel, I see your hands back up. Did you have further comment?
I have another project that I forgot to mention.
Oh my goodness, please go
focused
right ahead.
on Bureau of Reclamation. And this has been going on this will be it ends in May. And I have sent out the information to people to review, but I think I might send it again before we finalize it all. This is our Department of Conservation Watershed Coordinator Grant, and it involves 5 different components. One of those is coming up with potential locations for recharge facilities. And I presented that information previously. Now we will do what are basically some conceptual plans for how that might work on the 2 sites that were prioritized by, review through the TAC and through the GSA. It also includes creek revegetation projects, fire fuel load reductions, agricultural water supply analysis, and one on urban stormwater issues and how that could be used as a further type of water supply, but also could be managed better to reduce the amount of urban pollutants going into streams. So anybody that really wants to read all of these, I'm happy to send them out.
I definitely would.
It's a substantial amount of paper, however. So you might just read the recharge one and and leave it at that. But I'm happy to send them all out. Do you want me to send them to you, Beth, and you send them to the group?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Laurel.
Okay.
I'll coordinate with Eric to make sure we get that out. Excellent. Stephen?
Yeah, I just thought I'd provide a quick update on Potter Valley projects from Sonoma Water standpoint, so I'll keep it short. Sonoma Water, along with Mendocino County IWPC, we have a DWR grant that is bringing forward 2 potential diversion alternatives on the Eel River side to a 30% design, and we'll be recommending one of the 2 to the newly formed Eel Russian Project Authority, which is a JPA formed to basically advance the takeover of the Potter Valley project in light of PG&E's decommissioning process. So that grant will be wrapping up this year. Part of that includes a hydrogeologic assessment of Potter Valley itself, and that work is moving forward. And there will be a technical memo that we can provide to this group at the end of that. Separately, a Bureau of Reclamation grant has been secured by Sonoma Water to take one of the 2 diversion alternatives to 60% design over the next several years. So that project will be kicking off at some point in 2024. And all of this is sort of happening independent of PG&E's decommissioning process, which is still ongoing. So if there's any follow-up questions that folks have, I'd be happy to help answer them. Thanks.
Sean?
Just to add to that, and that agency is meeting here next Tuesday, I think in this room, IRPA.
Is it here or at the city?
Oh yeah, it's at the city.
Like
You're right.
City
Yeah,
Council.
yeah, sorry. But yeah, if you want to hear about it in the first person, that JPA will be meeting next week. I just wanted to, I know we have 2 other PMAs that the city is involved with. One is phase 4 of the recycled water system. That construction is active and happening. We're basically almost done with the distribution system aspect of it. The last part of the pipeline that will be going in will be coming down Low Gap through Brush and eventually under Highway 101. You see that big stack of purple pipe there. So we'll jack and boring under Highway 101 probably around May. Won't have any impacts to traffic. People won't even know that's happening, but there will be giant bore pits on either side of the highway there. And we are also in the middle of building, I think it's a 1.5 million gallon clear well at our water treatment plant for storage of recycled water. That's going to be sort of like an equalization basin, if you will, for that. And one of my employees has this great Instagram page called Capture 707, and you can, or 707 Capture, I can't remember. And there's great drone footage of that tank being constructed that if you're just kind of curious about the scale of it, it really captures it. It's, I guess, it's kind of funny, but it's really cool to look at. So that is underway. And then we also have basically source water protection PMA in there as well about acquiring wildlands in the Western Hills. We've continued to make incremental progress there at the city as well. We recently closed on an additional series of parcels and easements that weren't really big, but provide access to that for long-term management, and also hopefully someday some recreational use as well. And then we have grants out for 160-acre block, and then another basically unit of land that's a 40-acre block. And we're just continuing to try and make that chunk as big as we can. And it really is amazing when you go up there to see what's happening in the headwaters of all these streams that are largely ephemeral on the valley floor, to just see how much water is up in the Western Hills. It's pretty amazing. That's it.
Maybe you can put up some cameras up there so some of us who don't like walking up hills can... I mean, I wasn't saying it was me.
Yeah, I know it's very, very steep terrain.
Thank you. Anyone else want to report on any projects? We haven't heard from Javier, Ken, Joe. Anything? Ken saying Adam updated already. Great.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to go to Eric here in just a second, but I want to remind everyone that this week is Groundwater Awareness Week, and the Department of Water Resources has quite a few events happening virtually. You can go to their website and Google it and check it out. There's a lot of recordings of those events as well. So, yay, groundwater. Eric, you want to let us know what the GSA itself is up to?
Primarily, it's been focused on the fee study and the monitoring, but I would just like to call on Audra if you can just give us a quick 1-minute summary of the status of the CFW grants, the one for the Western Hills and the other one for the ISW study.
Yes, absolutely. So just like Sean was mentioning, we've been working with City of Ukiah staff in response to feedback we've received from CDFW. There were some concerns regarding some, well, I guess, corrective actions that need to be taken on the 160-acre property. So that is being set aside for now. The owners are working to see what remediation they can put in place, and hopefully acquisition or resubmission of that application should be able to go through at that point. We have just talked about separating out the other 32-acre property, and we are currently working on revising the application with the expectation to resubmit that separately next week. And so the hope is that since CDFW has already reviewed the application, they understand kind of the status of these two different properties, that they can proceed more quickly now. We have still not heard an update, unfortunately, on the other interconnected surface water study. I'm going to follow up again next week after we resubmit the Western Hills separate application for the 32 acres, excuse me. We hope that we will hear soon.
Great, thank you. Eric, anything else? No, okay.
No.
Moving right along, item 6 is water quality results from the 2023 sampling. Joe is going to give us a brief update on that and take any questions. Joe, take it away.
Okay, December 20 and 21, RCD staff went out with Blaine Tech, who are the subject matter experts in this regard, and we've hired them before to do this last year. And so they performed the water quality sampling of 10 wells and provided those samples to Alpha Labs here in Ukiah, and the results are on page 25. One of those days, a staff member from DWR accompanied the team, and I think they might have actually taken a couple samples too. And I think those data are yet to be seen. I think will be sent to Eric at some point. Does that make sense? Okay, good. One of the questions that had been posed to the RCD in 2023 was maybe the RCD should not look at hiring an outside firm like Blaine Tech and go ahead and just do this work in-house. And we looked at the details involved and the protocols, and it just didn't pencil out to be a worthwhile investment. The truck itself Blaine Tech uses is about a $250,000 rig. And their staff who does the job, he is amazing technician, knows it in and out, and although our staff did get trained in the process, the nuances and the troubleshooting for the variety of things that can occur are numerous. And so we decided that it does not make sense for the RCD to take this on, and so we do recommend that Blaine Tech continue to be the company to perform this service. They're very reasonable in the cost, and they adhere to the methodologies exactly, and we're thrilled with the way they do the work. So that's how we would like to go forward. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for that feedback. That's great, and that was mentioned by RCD staff at the last meeting, the last TAC meeting as well. So, or maybe it was the board meeting. I can't remember. So that's board meeting. So that's great. Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe on the results or process?
Question.
Sure. Turn your mic on. Thank you.
I see on the nitrates you had 26 on one of the samples. Yeah. What's happening there?
That's out of my wheelhouse, and I'd want to defer to Eric in that regard. Thanks.
Audra, the 6A through 6D, that is in nested well, and 6A would be the shallow, 6B would be deeper, C would be deeper than that, and D would be deeper than that. Is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, so I think what we might be seeing is that, yes, there's high elevated nitrates, and that could be influenced by some type of surface activity, potentially. But that is something that, as part of the annual report, we would be looking at this data and also describing what may be occurring if it's something that is considered to be outside of our MTs for degradation of water quality. Audra, do you have anything else to add?
No, that does cover it. Yeah, that is technically above the MCL, the drinking water quality standard. I don't know if that's appropriate for 6A and 6B. I'd have to look more carefully. These data will be included in next year's annual report, so we can look into this more closely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else?
Are these domestic wells?
These are monitoring wells. So 6A and 6B, that particular is one of the nested monitoring wells that we have within our network.
Okay, so just to remind everyone, so we'll see response to these results in not this year's annual report, but 2025? No.
Water year 2024.
Yeah, which will be produced next spring.
Next spring, yes, correct.
Water year, fiscal year, calendar year. I don't even know what day it is. Okay, moving right along. Thank you very much, Joe. We've got the couple more things on the agenda, our annual report results, which Larry Walker and Associates will provide, and then we just have our consent item and future agenda items. So I think if we can stay focused on this last item, we might get out of here a little bit early. Larry Walker and Associates, Laura and Audra, please take it away.
There we go. I just need to unmute myself. Okay, thank you so much, Beth. So we're going to take a quick look at the major results that we're seeing for the annual report, the water year 2023 report, rather, that we're assembling right now for submission on April 1st. We're going to really focus on water levels, you'll see, because that is such an important metric that impacts the sustainability of the basin and a couple other important factors like storage change over time. So again, this is going to be our third annual report. Beth was just talking about all these different ways to define a year. In this case, the water year is referring to October of 2022 to the end of September 2023. In a couple cases, we may include a couple more data points for water elevation just because the seasonal low might occur outside of that window, but it's my understanding that DWR is understanding of that fact. So again, the annual report is a way for the GSA to communicate with DWR, provide some status updates on things like GSP implementation, some of these PMAs that we heard about earlier in the meeting that have been taking place by City of Ukiah, that have been going on with CLSI and the like. Also sharing some of the data that were collected from our monitoring networks. We're also thinking about giving an update on the water budget. So how much groundwater extraction we estimate to have occurred, the water supply, surface water supply diversions, total water use that we were able to characterize, and then estimated changes in the groundwater storage. All right, we're going to talk very quickly about what this water year looked like compared to previous years. So you can see that I've indicated for 3 different gauges how much precipitation was measured for the 2023 water year, and it was above average at every single one of these gauges, in and around 40 inches. So definitely above what we were seeing kind of during those drought years that happened just a few years ago. Looking at the US Drought Monitor, the sort of summary graphics that they provide, taking a quick look at how things were looking in April of 2022 compared to April of 2023 after we had a very wet and rainy season, you can see that Ukiah and Mendocino County, along with many other counties, was no longer considered to be in a drought condition. So that rainfall made a big difference. We've talked a little bit earlier about these sustainable management criteria, these different thresholds against which we compare things like groundwater elevation, water quality, to see if the basin is sort of on track to hopefully achieve sustainability. And again, today, we're really going to be focusing on groundwater elevation and take a look at our representative monitoring points, as well as some continuous sensor data that we've kind of been hearing about. We have plotted that up this year, and this is the first time we're incorporating those data into the annual report. So again, which is yet another way that we are making incremental progress towards those recommended corrective actions and some of the different data gap closures that were identified as priorities in the GSP. All right, so quick reminder about our groundwater elevation network. We have a combination of these representative monitoring points. These are sort of the official locations that are used for comparison against sustainable management criteria, which we'll take a look at in the next slide. And so we're hoping to expand this network. As we heard earlier, we just need more data in order to incorporate additional wells and have an idea what the level should be set at for the different sustainable management criteria. So there are presently 7 wells. Again, we heard a little bit earlier in the meeting that there was one DWR well that we discovered was destroyed during a construction project. So we have been in coordination with DWR to figure out the replacement process. So we have spoken to the tech and to the board about the recommendation that for now, we utilize another well in the broader network, Ukiah Valley 36. It is also screened to Aquifer 2. It's about a mile from the destroyed well. And we're suggesting that for now, that be utilized as a replacement. In discussions with DWR, the idea is that perhaps we can generate kind of interim or preliminary sustainable management criteria, and then those can be updated later, likely during the 2027 periodic update. Okay, and then again, we have these 5 additional wells that have continuous sensors that were paid for by the DWR Technical Support Service funding. And again, we're gonna look at some of the results from those wells, see how they respond to things like precipitation and how useful they can be to tracking kind of more fine scale variation. All right, so we talked a little bit about these SMCs, sustainable management criteria, and we have sort of 3 different indicators that we use for each one of our representative monitoring point wells. So again, because one of these was destroyed and the replacement does not yet have SMCs established, we'll just be looking through 5 different hydrographs, which are looking at the water elevation through time, so we can compare against these SMCs. So the first SMC that you'll see on the plots that I will show next is going to be something called a trigger level. So this is not regulatory, but it's a way to sort of check and see how water levels look after we've had recharge. So it's in the springtime. Does it look like we're on track to have a good year and probably not dip below the next thing, which is our measurable objective? So again, trigger level, just kind of an indicator to check out in the springtime. The measurable objective, so that is identified and was developed in the GSP. As Laura noted earlier, these may be refined or reevaluated in the future, but we're going with what's in the GSP right now. And the hope is that if absolute kind of groundwater level elevations can stay above the measurable objective, or MO, then we're on track, we think, for achieving that groundwater sustainability in the next 2 decades as Sigma requires. The minimum threshold, or MT, is another sort of warning value. So this is saying if groundwater elevation falls below this kind of basement level, then we start getting concerned that probably actions need to be taken in order to ensure that sustainability is achieved in the next 20 years. Again, transient little dips below the minimum threshold do not indicate non-compliance, but we might want to think about what's happening in the basin that's leading to these excursions below the minimum threshold. And just to remind ourselves, in the GSP, the definition of a sort of undesirable result, which would mean that we're not meeting our SMCs, is when more than 1/3 of our representative monitoring points falls below their minimum threshold for 2 consecutive years. So we'll see that we are not in that situation, but one of the wells has had issues the past 2 years. Okay, so again, we're going to be looking at these detailed representative monitoring point hydrographs. So we're plotting, in most cases, what are monthly measurements through time to look at how groundwater elevation fluctuates. And we're going to look at the long-term record that we have for each well also, so that we can get a sort of a more historical sense for how things are looking. And the great thing is that because Mendocino County RCD has been able to go out and make mostly monthly measurements for a lot of these sites, we are getting a more complete picture of how water levels are changing throughout the year, rather than just having a fall and spring measurement. So this has been really useful. And what we notice is that for a couple of the wells, we do get pretty pronounced seasonal lows or dips. Again, you'll see that this is most problematic kind of in the northern part of the basin near Redwood Valley and Lake Mendocino. We've discussed in this group before what possibly could be happening at some of these sites. And again, we're going to look to future model updates and additional data collection, and hopefully installation of continuous sensors to get a better handle on why some of these patterns are emerging. As we look through these hydrographs in the next few slides, I did use a red arrow to indicate the October 2023 measurement, just to sort of orient people, because the records, for these wells are a bit different from well to well. And so they aren't all the same. So I wanted to be able to help guide you as you look through. Okay, with that, let's take a look at one of our wells. This is Ukiah Valley 26. So you can see we're located kind of mid to low part of the basin over here on the east side of Highway 101. And here we have plotted the record, which goes back to around 2015. We can see the shift over to monthly measurements, which has been, again, really great in elucidating some of these finer scale changes. This well is doing great. All measurements have been above this measurable objective, the MO. This well is doing well. It is on track for meeting sustainability goals. We also see the spring measurements are above the trigger. I'm going to go a little quickly, so please interrupt me if you have additional questions or want to look at something longer. I just want to try to move us through some of this information so we can focus on a couple of sites where we have questions or see some interesting patterns. Again, we see another location here in Aquifer 1 down towards the south. Okay, here we can see Highway 101, Largo here. And so again, we're seeing that we had a transition over to monthly monitoring, which has been great. Again, all measurements are above that measurable objective. It's a good sign. We got a lot of recharge after that very rainy season. Okay, here's one of the sites that we've been paying more attention to. This site has also been identified as one that would benefit from a installation of a continuous sensor. And so that can absolutely be part of the side conversations that we have with CLSI. Here, what we're observing is a location that's pretty close to Lake Mendocino. And we're seeing that, again, before we had these twice yearly measurements, we had RCD able to make monthly measurements. And 2 years in a row, we've had these sort of dry season excursions below the minimum threshold for multiple months. So again, this is not a non-compliance issue, but it is something, again, that we hope to look into more to better understand the impact of possibly nearby pumping. This has been a topic of conversation in this group, as I mentioned before. But again, something we're still looking into a little bit more. Interestingly, though, you do see good wet season recovery, especially last year. All right, so again, another Aquifer 1 location. This is a site that I believe CLSI has a continuous sensor in, so we're going to coordinate with them to get even more detailed data in the future. That's a hope. And so this location that we see here, or sorry, this data point we see here, just want to note that's a November measurement. But again, we're seeing all recent measurements are above the measurable objective. It's doing well, we're on track. Okay, so this is one of the wells that has a longer record dating back several decades. So we are going to look at a more detailed depiction of the last 10 years so that we can see a little more clearly what's been going on. And again, this is up in the part of the basin that's right up there, closer to Redwood Valley. Okay, so here we can see we have not there has not been deviation below the minimum threshold, but over the past couple of water years, there have been several months where water levels decline below the measurable objective. And so again, in no way non-compliance, just something to keep an eye on. And, you know, this is an area as well where we had discussed, or this group has discussed, wanting to get some more data gaps closed and get some more information. Okay, again, another well. This is a little farther north where we have additional information. This is east of the river, over here by Old River Road. And we're going to look a little more closely at the more recent water level record. Okay, so this is a location that in the fairly recent past, there was a little bit of deviation down below that measurable objective. This year, we saw quite a lot of recharge from all that precipitation, and there was no dip below that measurable objective. So again, on track. Okay, so those were all the wells for which we currently have defined sustainable management criteria for water, groundwater level. This is a depiction of Ukiah Valley 36, the proposed replacement RMP that's in the mid-basin and screened to Aquifer 2. So again, there has not been an effort yet to define SMCs for this location. I just wanted to show you some of the historical trends, and that it appears this year is within the trends we've seen since 2017, and that there was certainly recharge during the very rainy season that we had. Okay, so unless there are any questions about these representative monitoring points, I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit more information related to the continuous sensor data that we've incorporated for the first time in this annual report.
Does anyone have burning questions they need to ask right now? Want to hold off and see what's next? Any hands online? Okay, Audra, keep going. Thank you.
Fantastic. Ah, I forgot, excuse me, I got a little ahead of myself. I did want to give this sort of snapshot of the representative monitoring point conditions during the seasonal low in fall of 2023. So again, this just summarizes what we saw in the hydrographs I just walked us through. These 4 locations were on track for the entire water year. We do not have SMCs defined for this replacement well that we've been working on with DWR. This is a location where we did have a multi-month excursion below the minimum threshold. And then up here, it is, you know, definitely this well still had water levels above the minimum threshold, but they were between measurable objective and minimum threshold for several months at a time. So just like a little bit of interest in seeing how this well performs moving forward. Okay, again, it's really these two wells in the top portion of the basin where we're seeing maybe some dry season declines. But with these monthly measurements that RCD has been making, we are able to see this good rainy season recovery, especially with the above average precipitation that Basin had over the last water year. All right, and again, we are not in a situation where there is non-compliance or an undesirable result. We're just kind of keeping tabs on things, and hopefully we'll be able to explore causes into the future. Okay, so just like Sean was mentioning during the PMA discussion and discussion around how to address some of the corrective actions that DWR has included, wanted to just speak a little bit more to the monitoring network updates. So just like we've been hearing, there are these 5 TSS funded wells that have been outfitted with continuous water level sensors. We did not have very much data to include for last year's report. This year is the first time that we'll actually be incorporating some of the data from these locations. It takes some time, a little bit of time and effort to figure out how to incorporate continuous data into our database and how to upload it to the Sigma database, but we've been working on that, and I think we've made big strides towards that, so I'm really pleased. And we're gonna actually take a look. Oh, Eric, yes.
Audra, just can you please highlight UVB GSA 6 so we can relate that to the water quality results we looked at previously?
Oh, it's right up here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'd forgotten about that. So yeah, so that's kind of in the northern part of the basin, not too far from the main stem. Hopefully you can see my mouse cursor here.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Right. Okay, and again, that location, just like Eric mentioned, that's a nested or multi-completion well. So there are multiple well casings that are drilled to various depths. Okay. So here we're gonna just quickly look through, out of respect of time, I won't dwell on these too long. I just think it's nice to see the detailed fluctuations in groundwater elevation in response to precipitation. So what we have here is basically the record of information from these these wells that have been outfitted with continuous sensors. So you can see this starts in about 2022. You can see precipitation has also been depicted here, and on the secondary y-axis. Over here on the primary y-axis, we have the groundwater elevation, so kind of the absolute elevation above mean sea level. And you can see that there is definite fluctuation in response to precipitation. The absolute variation in groundwater elevation varies quite a bit from site to site, as we'll see. So the absolute difference here from top to bottom is only like 3 feet. This is A, so this is the most shallow of the locations. Oh, Laurel, yes.
I just wanted to clarify that these wells are not pumped at all and are not near active pumped wells.
They are not pumped at all. These are observation wells. I do not know offhand about the proximity to actively pumped wells.
Okay.
That's a good question, though. I would have to look into that a little bit. Yeah, so thank you, Laura. These are observation wells. These are not used for supply. Okay. But we'll just kind of click through and see some of the variability among these. So we're kind of moving through the basin from top to bottom. So now we're at this new site, UVB GSA 05. This is not a nested well, and so this is just one well casing. But you can see here there's a variation over the record of about 7 feet or so. And again, you can see the response and elevation to precipitation, especially over this very rainy period. And we see again, kind of dry season declines and then recovery. All right, here we are moving on down to UVB GSA 2. Again, this is south of the city of Ukiah. Over here on the west side of the river, you see a similar sort of fluctuation. The shape and responsiveness of the curve is slightly different. Again, this is a site where we have approximately 7 feet of variability across the record. And the last site we'll look at is that UVB GSA 01. We are only looking at the most shallow of the wells. This is the well that has a most observable variation of about 18 feet or so over the record. But again, you see a lot of responsiveness to precipitation events and receding water level during the dry season. Whoops, excuse me, everybody. So again, this is just a nice way to see what the output is like for these continuous sensors and see how you can combine this with precipitation records to get a better handle on the responsiveness of wells to precipitation events. And that's really what I wanted to share with you all. Please let me know if you have any questions. There is additional information, of course, included in the annual report, but this gives you a good snapshot of some of the key sort of status updates.
Eric, can you make sure that this presentation gets put on the website under the materials, because it is a lot to digest, especially after a long meeting. I'm going to go to TAC members both in the room and online. Please indicate if you have a question. Joe, please go ahead.
What does TSS funded well mean?
Technical Support Services was a grant program through DWR where they provided technical support and funding for installation of continuous sensors like these I'm drilling. And so these are just DWR funded, but they've sort of been handed over to the GSA for maintenance.
Any follow-ups, Joe? That's good. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone online. Anyone at all, public as well? Stephen?
Yeah, just had a quick question about the couple of wells that drop below the minimum threshold, and I forget how it was specified in the GSP about what would constitute non-compliance. Just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me actually just bring that up. So it's if there were a third of the wells in our representative monitoring point network, so that would be between 2 and 3, depending upon how we think about our changing network right now. If those were to have dips below that minimum threshold, the red line that was depicted on all the hydrographs for 2 years in a row. So we've had one well that has dipped below for 2 years in a row.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's thanks for clarifying that. We have similar type of situation in Sonoma Valley. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
I do think too for these ones, especially that problematic one, I meant to meet offline and see exactly where that one is at. It is kind of curious, but I also think as we roll out continuously rolling data and we start getting a longer track record for these things, a lot of these thresholds were set basically in a vacuum under a deadline without really having a good understanding of how these things normally behaved. And, now sounding heretical, we may need to review our thresholds at some point when we know what is quote unquote normal for some of these sites. And that one that looks terrible, that might be just doing what it does. We don't really know because it's just all too new. That's it.
Laura, could you just give your thoughts on, to Sean's point, which is a really good point, would it make sense to revisit these if we get another 2 years of data as part of the 2027 periodic evaluation, or is that something you think we would need more time and data to then confidently define that or revise these potentially?
So in the GSP, we said that we were going to revise as much as possible or what we could by 2027. So I think let's collect 2 more years of data, see where we are, and then we will have a better picture, because Sean is right. I mean, we put together these numbers with just so limited information. And I wonder if some of the reason why we didn't see the dipping below the threshold is because those measurements were done twice per year, and maybe sometimes were November, and maybe there was already precipitation in November. So maybe the fall measurement is not a real fall measurement. You see what I mean? So we were really, if we get 2 more years of and if we go to continuous even better, we really get a sense of the real behavior. But it's written in our GSP that the plan was to enhance the data and revise.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then one other follow-up to Audra. Could you clarify, of the RMP wells, how many of those are related to interconnected surface water SMC monitoring?
There are 2, and you know what? I would need to pull that up quickly. So 2 of the wells are related to interconnected surface waters. There is 1 additional well in the interconnected surface water network. 2 of those wells did dip below their minimum thresholds this year.
Okay,
So
and then my follow-up question to that is, what is our definition of undesirable results for the depletion of interconnected surface waters SMC?
So presently in the GSP, those are defined using groundwater elevation at those 3 wells. However, DWR has different requirements that are included in Sigma as to how SMCs are defined for interconnected surface water. So that is one of the reasons I think that the staff report that accompanied the determination letter was really highlighting SMC development for interconnected surface waters, because it's really like a depletion volume. And so we do not have enough information to define the SMCs for interconnected surface water the way that Sigma intends. And so that's another reason why more information needs to be collected in that network.
No, thank you. That's perfect. The reason I wanted to dive into that as part of this update is because I think it's really important for a couple of reasons. The first is it highlights the importance of what the TAC discussed today for data collection and continuous monitoring. And also what we highlighted and what Dominic pointed out as well is that there is guidance that is coming out from DWR on the interconnected surface water SMC. We have 1 out of 3 of those documents that has come out. The second one, if I heard you correctly, Dominic, is intended to come out in the fall of this year. So as part of our efforts, we have to be diligent in looking at interconnected surface water and redefining the SMCs related to that when we have that guidance fully coming out. And that should be a priority as part of our 2027 periodic evaluation, because I think that is something where perception-wise, I could see that being a tricky thing if we have 2 out of the 3 below the minimum threshold, but we need to also look at redefining that and making sure that's accurate. So just wanted to point that out to the group and make that known. I think that should also be a priority for the GSA to consider.
Thank you. Any last comments, thoughts on this topic? Okay. With that, Dominic, I want to go back to you. I did promise that we'd afford you a few moments to give any updates from DWR outside of the items or stressing something you've already said.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so it's the 10th anniversary of the signing of Sigma. So like you said, Beth, we're celebrating Groundwater Awareness Week. So check our website and our social media. We've got a lot of great videos, workshops, things like that. And then just really quick on the interconnected surface water, 1 should be coming out in the next few months. I'm just not sure on the exact date. And the second the third by the fall. So all of them should be out by the fall. The governor released a salmon strategy for a hotter, drier climate, which is timely because I don't know if you all saw the feds are talking about, again, shutting the salmon fishery in the ocean. So it really timely. A lot of great work went into that. So please check that out. With respect to well permitting, the 2 executive orders, N722 and N323, we created an analysis of basically everything happening in the state by GSAs and counties. We also have some recommendations, so I'll share that link. And then Steven asked about basin characterization. I'm not, with respect to well inventory, I'm not super familiar with that work. So I'll ask about that and try to provide an update at either the next meeting or via email. And then there was some mention of how one of our staff members went out and took a bunch of water quality samples. I don't know if that has been uploaded to our water data library, but it will be. And then if you'd like, whenever we do get the lab results, I can email them. And that was kind of a one-time thing that we were doing to establish a baseline for our wells. But we measured for a lot of different constituents. So that will probably be interesting. Lastly, I'm always reachable for questions from the TAC, from the board, and also from the public. So if you have any questions, just look up Ukiah DWR point of contact. My name is Dominic Gutierrez again, and I'm always happy to talk. And if there's anything else I'm forgetting, I'll reach out to Eric, like I said, via email either today or tomorrow with links for all these things.
Great,
So,
Dominic.
thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And Audra, thank you. Sorry for your annual report presentation. I know moved on quickly, but thank you. That was very thorough and easily digestible. I did try to get us out a little bit early. Sorry, it didn't work. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. White moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Gaska seconded. Anyone opposed? Consent calendar is approved. Future agenda items, there's a few listed on the agenda. I will refer you to that. Eric, any last words before we adjourn?
Again, just sincere thanks to the TAC for the discussion today. It's going to be extremely helpful as part of the process moving the GSA forward on the fee study, but also beyond that. So again, sincere thanks for the discussion. It's been very helpful.
Great. Thank you to everyone who attended today. The next GSA board meeting is?
It is going to be likely in August. It's going to be
April.
scheduled, or board meeting, sorry,
Board
I thought you said TAC meeting. Board meeting's on April 11th in the board supervisors chambers here today.
And I refer you to the website for more materials and more information and contact information for Eric if you have any questions. With that, 12:30, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Beth.
Get out 1 minute early.
Oh, you were wondering what was
Recording
happening, why
stopped.
that problematic was.